Welcome to session 7 of the PayPal story. So let's start with a recap of session 6. Now, session 6 was all about the system called IGOR, which was all about how PayPal managed to solve the problem of deadbeat buyers and sellers and prevent fraud when you use PayPal by developing a pattern recognition artificial intelligence system combined with human intelligence. And this is now way back in almost 2000, 2001, actually 2000. Well before machine language, AI, pattern recognition were mainstream. Now, why the system was called IGOR was that on fraud, there used to be a Russian hacker who was kept trying to break into PayPal systems. And PayPal kept building defenses. And this person, it was almost like a game till Igor gave up and told the PayPal team that you are too good. But the PayPal team also had a fair amount of respect for this hacker called Igor. And therefore, when this system was built and we had to give it a name, it was called Igor. Now, in this session, we are going to cover a very important point because PayPal, as you know, if you heard the previous session, was kind of bleeding money because it wasn't charging any fees and it had a fair amount of costs. So we had to come up with a system where we had to start collecting fees. Just as credit cards collect fees from merchants, similarly, PayPal needed to collect a fee for sales. So PayPal always wanted to keep sending money free. But if for the receivers of money, if you were an individual, it was free. But if you were a seller selling some goods, then there was a fee. And if you really look at it, a seller wants sales. So if the seller can get incremental sales, then paying a fee is well worth it. But obviously, like all sellers, they don't want to pay fees, especially if it was free. So when PayPal introduced these fees, there was a huge sort of backlash on the internet and sellers started complaining. But then there was also a very large community of sellers who said that, look, PayPal is doing a very, very important function for us. And they obviously have to stay in business. It will really help us if they stay in business. So we had a very large number of sellers who were supportive of the fees that PayPal was charging and saying that these are quite reasonable and so on and so forth. But some sellers actually who were kind of disgruntled, even they could not remove PayPal because a seller will want to sell. And if a buyer wants to pay with any method which is reasonable, they will want to make the sale and accept the payment. So like a seller posted on the internet is that this PayPal is like this annoying mosquito, which I have to live with. I can't get rid of it, right? So while it has initially created a storm, it kind of settled down. But this was a key risk in trying to monetize the very large number of users that you have, and a very critical phase in the evolution of PayPal. Because if PayPal had failed to monetize, like this company Twitter, which has tried various monetization models, but it hasn't worked, while there have been others like PayPal, Google, etc., where the monetization models have worked really well. So that was a very big thing. Now, the other thing was that PayPal had to live with competition. We already talked about bill point. Now, Citibank in early 2000 had launched a service called C2It, and we will cover Citibank specifically in a separate session. But when we were trying to raise money, one of the questions that always used to happen, this was now the round that we had just raised before the dot-com bust, was that people used to ask us that, okay, you have 1 million users, because we had around 1 million users at that time. But what will happen if one of the banks wakes up and decides that they are going to compete with you? And there were rumors anyway going around that Citibank was going to launch C2It, because one of the analysts, Mary Meeker, had asked a question in the Citibank's analyst meeting saying, why are you letting this company, PayPal, eat your lunch? So Citibank had to mount a competitive response. And then they launched C2It. And when we looked at C2It, we were fortunately able to respond to the people who were going to fund us, saying that, look, if you go and use PayPal and you use C2It, you will soon see that there is nothing that we have to fear from C2It, because they just don't get it. Like they had a 2-3 page form that you had to fill on the internet. And internet is all about instant. They just didn't get it. So we said we fear startups like PayPal, which are more in the garage than some of the established companies, because this internet is so far removed from the DNA of established companies that they will take a while to get it. So we used to track around 70 companies. There were companies like Flues, Beans, eCharge, using very, very different ways of bringing in payments. But we used to track everyone, trying to see, can we learn something from them? And we had a whole team setting up accounts there, trying to see whether they were good or bad. Because we were determined to be the leader, but that didn't mean that we were arrogant, and we always were paranoid that someone might be able to beat us, which is another very good thing for disruptive innovators to learn. Now, PayPal ended up raising $225 million of equity. So on March 6, 2001, they raised a Series D round for 90 million. On April 5, 2000, a Series C round of 100 million. And before that, around 35 million in a Series A and B, if you, I think, take Infinity and X.com and put it together. So PayPal managed to raise a fairly large amount of equity, and that enabled it to sort of try this very innovative model of trying to build the network first, not worry about monetization, and then worry about monetization later. So now it's not so clear, while that model still prevails, but post COVID-19 and things like that, how exactly this will shape up is a little bit of a question mark. So what you've got to see is that for PayPal to have become successful, there were a number of challenges and things that it managed to solve, and the government played a key role. The backers, those who put in the early money, they played a key role, and the team played a key role, and to some extent, luck played a key role. So for very, very large disruptive innovations to happen, in some ways, like the forces have to align, and you have to have a perfect storm for you to succeed. Well, that's all for this session. The story will continue in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.